Your brain isn't overthinking because it's working hard. It's overthinking because it found something it couldn't resolve and it keeps going back. That's not intelligence. That's a threat response running on a loop. Here's what I want to show you. Overthinking is not one thing. It's three different patterns that feel identical from the inside, and each one has a different explanation. Once you can tell them apart, you stop trying to think your way out of it, because that's the move that keeps you stuck. See if any of these sound familiar. First one, something in your life feels uncertain or out of your control. A conversation that went wrong, a decision you can't make, something at work that's unresolved. And your brain just won't leave it alone. You come back to it over and over. You've already thought about it 100 times. Nothing's changed. And you go back again. That's not you being thorough. That's your brain trying to think its way back to feeling safe. Second one, something happened and it doesn't feel good. And instead of sitting with that feeling, your mind just gets busy. You start thinking about something else, or you physically get up and start doing things, or you just start running thoughts, unrelated thoughts, to-do lists, random mental chatter. It feels like your brain switched channels. That's not distraction, that's avoidance. Your mind found a way to not feel what it didn't want to feel. Third one is the one nobody talks about. Sometimes there's no specific problem, no unresolved situation. You're just watching your own thoughts like they're playing out on a screen, following them, almost entertained by them. It's like TV, except the TV is inside your head and you're the one making up the content. And it fills time, it fills silence, and it feels like something even when it's nothing. Three patterns, one label, all called overthinking. Here's the thing none of the stop overthinking advice actually addresses. Your brain isn't malfunctioning when it does any of this. It's functioning exactly the way it's designed to. The loop that won't stop is your threat detection system doing its job, scanning for a way to resolve something it's flagged as dangerous. The mental busyness is your emotional regulation system doing its job, managing a feeling that feels too uncomfortable to sit with. The internal TV is your default mode network doing its job, generating stimulation when there's nothing else to focus on. None of these are character flaws. None of them mean you think too much or that something's wrong with you. They mean your brain is doing what brains do. The problem isn't that it's happening. The problem is that most people respond to overthinking by trying to think their way out of it, which feeds exactly the system that's already running on overdrive. A lot of this shows up for me when I know what I need to do, but doing it would mean acting against how I see myself. And instead of just doing the thing, my brain starts negotiating, making it more complicated than it actually is. What I eventually realized is that the overthinking wasn't thinking. It was protecting a version of myself I didn't want to challenge. Let's go a level deeper on why the loop is so hard to break. When your brain perceives a loss of control, not actual loss of control, just the feeling that you can't influence an outcome, it activates the same threat detection system it uses for physical danger. Your amygdala flags the situation as unresolved, and the part of your brain responsible for suppressing that response, the prefrontal cortex, starts going offline. This is why logical reassurance doesn't work when you're in a mind loop. I know everything's probably fine does nothing. The thinking brain isn't driving in this situation. The threat detection system is. And it doesn't take instructions from logic, it takes instructions from evidence. Evidence that you're safe, evidence that the situation is resolved. In the absence of that evidence, it keeps the loop running, not to torture you, but to protect you. The emotional avoidance piece is subtler, but just as important. Research on rumination consistently shows that overthinking often functions as an avoidance strategy, specifically avoiding an uncomfortable feeling by replacing it with thought. The feelings don't go anywhere, they get suppressed, and suppressed emotions don't resolve, they become the fuel for the next loop. You've probably noticed this. You think about something until you feel slightly better, and then later it comes back stronger. That's the pattern. The thinking was the avoidance, the emotion underneath it never got processed. And the default mode network, the brain system that activates when you're not focused on an external task, it picks whatever's unresolved or emotionally charged and then runs it automatically. Not because it's productive, because the brain would rather generate its own stimulation than sit with silence. The reason just stop overthinking doesn't work is that it's trying to interrupt a system that's doing exactly what it was built to do. You can't outthink a threat response. You can't think your way through emotional avoidance. And you can't tell your default mode network to be quiet by thinking at it. Different pattern, different response. For the control loop, the one driven by uncertainty and threat, what your nervous system needs is evidence, not reassurance. The evidence that works is small, concrete action, not solving the whole problem, just one thing you can actually do. Even a tiny action signals to the threat detection system we have some agency here. The loop doesn't need to keep running. For the emotional avoidance loop, when the overthinking is covering a feeling, the move is to go toward the feeling instead of away from it. That sounds counterintuitive and uncomfortable. It is, but the emotion you're avoiding is driving the bus whether you look at it or not. Naming it directly, actually sitting with it for 60 seconds without trying to change it, drains the charge faster than hours of mental busyness. For the default mode pattern, when your brain is just entertaining itself, the antidote here is external engagement. So a task with enough complexity to pull your focus outward. So movement, a real conversation, anything that gives the brain something to do that isn't running internal narrative. The default mode network goes quiet when there's an actual task, so just give it one. None of these are quick, but they're different from what most people try, which is more thinking. And that specifically is the move that feeds the loop. I want you to think about which of those three patterns is most yours: the control loop, the emotional avoidance, the internal TV. Most people have a dominant one, the pattern that their brain defaults to most of the time. And knowing which one it is changes what you can actually do about it. If you know yours, drop it in the comments. I'm curious which one shows up most. I also built something that can help you identify the pattern that's running your thinking. It's a short assessment, links in the description, takes about 2 minutes. If this hit, follow, there will be more.